Welcome to F8. I want to start today by talking about protecting something that is really incredibly important to all of us, and that is the integrity of our elections. In 2016, we were slow to identify Russian interference. We expected more traditional cyber attacks like phishing and malware and hacking, and we identified those and notified the right people, but we didn't expect these coordinated information operations and large networks of fake accounts that we're now aware of. We deployed new AI tools that successfully identified and took down tens of thousands of fake accounts before they could do anything. We've traced the fake account network back to Russia and taken down their network. We're doing more. We're requiring everyone running political and issue ads or running large pages to be verified with a government ID. By the end of this year, we will have 20,000 people working on security and content review at Facebook. Beyond elections, we are focused on fighting fake news more broadly. So some of this is nation states who are politically motivated, like we talked about before. But all of this we're fighting in the same way, with AI tools, with thousands of content reviewers, and verifying people who are running large pages and running sensitive ads. Now, the third category is people, real people who are just sharing provably false hoaxes. And the playbook here is building tools to get better at flagging content that is going viral, so fact checkers can look at it so we can show it less, and for the people who do see it, to make sure that they see related articles that are more accurate, that put this in context so people can understand what's really going on. I also want to talk about data privacy. What happened with Cambridge Analytica was a major breach of trust. An app developer took data that people had shared with them and sold it. So we need to make sure that this never happens again. We need to make sure that we find any other bad apps that are out there. So we're currently in the process of investigating every single app that had access to a large amount of people's information before we made these big changes in 2014. We've also started putting a tool in front of everyone that shows them all of the apps that they are using and lets them easily remove access to the ones that they no longer want to use. And with the GDPR coming up in Europe, we're asking everyone around the world, not just in Europe, to review your privacy controls. In your web browser, you today have a simple way to clear your cookies and clear your browsing history. Right? And the idea is that a lot of sites need this data to work. You need cookies. But you should have the ability to go in and clear your history at any point that you want. So we're working on a version of this for Facebook, too. It's a simple control where you can clear your browsing history, what you've clicked on, the websites you visited, and so on. And we're going to call it Clear History. And we're starting with something that a lot of people have asked about recently, and that's the information that we get from websites and apps who are using Facebook's advertising and analytics tools. So you're going to be able to use this tool to see the information about the apps and websites you've interacted with. You'll be able to clear all this information from your account, and you'll even be able to turn it off, having this information stored with your account going forward. So let's start with the Facebook app. We're rolling out something that we call Watch Party, which lets you watch video and chat with your friends. So let's say that your friend is testifying in Congress. For example, we're launching a new Groups tab to make groups more central to the overall Facebook experience. So for me, I'm going to have all my groups in one place, my family group, my running group, my game group. There are 200 million people on Facebook who list themselves as single, so clearly there's something to do here. And if we're focused on helping people build meaningful relationships, then this is perhaps the most meaningful of all. So today, we are announcing a new set of features coming soon around dating. Now, this is going to be for building real long-term relationships, all right, not just hookups. It's going to be in the Facebook app, but it's totally optional. It's opt-in. If you want, you can make a dating profile. And I know a lot of you are going to have questions about this, so I want to be clear that we have designed this with privacy and safety in mind from the beginning. Your friends aren't going to see your profile. You're only going to be suggested people who are not your friends who have opted into dating, who fit your preferences, although I can't promise that you're going to get email. It's a tough world. Now let's talk about Instagram. So we're launching a completely new design for Explore that is going to organize the content around topic channels now. We're announcing video chat and Instagram. You're going to be able to just tap on a new camera icon right in the top of any direct thread that you have, and you're going to be able to video chat one-on-one or with groups. You're going to be able to minimize the video while you're chatting and using Instagram. And I think that this is going to be a really big deal, and people are really going to like this. Last year at F8, we announced the AR camera effects platform, and today we are bringing it to Instagram. Now let's talk about WhatsApp. Today, we are announcing that we are bringing group video calling to WhatsApp soon, too. All right, I want to talk about stories for a minute. The next phase for WhatsApp, beyond just communicating with your friends and family, is going to be helping people connect with businesses as well. And today, a lot of people don't want to call businesses, or you just want to be able to text. So now, the next step is going to be giving large businesses tools to be on WhatsApp too, and we're working on this now. For Messenger, we are focused on building richer ways for people to connect privately with their friends and family and businesses too. When you're messaging, you really want a simple and fast experience. So we're taking this moment to completely redesign Messenger to focus on these ideas. And here's what the new Messenger is going to look like. I mentioned earlier that we are bringing the AR camera effects platform to Instagram. Now, we're also bringing this to the Messenger platform as well. It's going to be a really fun way for people to use augmented reality to connect with their family and friends privately and in real time. Let's go beyond our apps for a minute and talk about virtual reality and the future. So here's an example of how compelling I think that this is going to be. Now, if you have some photos from your childhood home, we can now use computer vision to fill in the gaps with this pointillism effect and recreate the rooms of your childhood home where you grew up. So you're going to be able to go into VR with your family and visit and feel like you were right there. It feels like you were in a dream. In addition to software, we're all building hardware. So we've been preparing Oculus Go for launch. And the big news I have to share today is Oculus Go is shipping today. It starts at $199. It is the first really affordable standalone virtual reality headset. It's launching with more than 1,000 apps, and it has the highest quality lenses and optics that we have ever built into a VR device. So yes, this is an important moment. We need to do more to keep people safe, and we will. But we also need to keep building and bringing the world closer together. Thank you for coming out today. Thank you for everything you're doing to bring people together. Have a great F8.
Mark Zuckerberg was a Harvard freshman with a gift for computer programming. Less than a decade later, he is the baby-faced, multi-billionaire power broker who rubs shoulders with the president.
My name is Barack Obama, and I'm the guy who got Mark to wear a jacket and tie.
I think most people still haven't really digested the scale of Facebook or how quickly it's grown.
The goal is obviously to get to ubiquity. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg wants everyone to be on this service.
He transformed a dorm room project into the internet's biggest global village. The site now has over 900 million users.
You can't underestimate how driven Mark Zuckerberg really is.
Zuckerberg is just as visionary as Steve Jobs. He's going to prove just as influential as Bill Gates.
But for all that success, Zuckerberg has confronted bitter battles and lawsuits over Facebook's origins.
One, he wanted to control his own thing. And two, if he's going to go against someone, he's going to crush them.
We spent 3 months working with Mark, being essentially led on. We were all blindsided. We had no idea that he was working on a competing product.
He has waged an all-out war on his biggest competitors.
Facebook and Google's relationship is pretty simple. They just don't like each other.
And Zuckerberg has come under fire for pushing the limits on user privacy.
Users have less control over private information. They don't fully know how their information is being shared.
He's not dealing with just a piece of technology. He's dealing with people and their behavior. And in many ways, he's doing it on the fly.
They have amassed this humongous database of information about us because we trusted them. So the question is, should we still trust them?
I think that the goal that we went into it with wasn't to make an online community, but sort of like a mirror for the real community that existed in real life.
Mark Zuckerberg. We think we know him because we've seen his life unfold in the Oscar-winning movie The Social Network. The portrait was unsparing, a super geek, intense, cutthroat, brilliant, and socially crippled.
I don't understand.
Which part?
But was it accurate?
He's always had friends. You know, he's a pretty social guy. I think the last time I checked, 879 friends on Facebook.
This is the real Mark Zuckerberg in rarely seen footage shot at Facebook's first corporate headquarters by young filmmakers in 2005.
What are we celebrating, Mark?
It's got 3 million users.
3 million users.
Yeah.
And how long has Facebook been around?
Not that long. A little more than a year. Like
a little more than a year.
At this point, yeah.
While Zuckerberg pushes the envelope on user privacy, he opted out of participating in this program. In 2004, at the age of 19, he created Facebook. Today, the 28-year-old CEO has accumulated a net worth estimated at $15.5 billion.
Mark's mission from the beginning was about connecting people, and it was clearly based on this theory that if the world were more connected, it would be a better place.
But there's a lot of surprises when you really dig deep into the story of Facebook. The biggest single surprise is the peculiar and tenacious personality of Mark Zuckerberg and the depth of his convictions and his consistency.
Born in 1984, he grew up in the Hudson River town of Dobbs Ferry, a bedroom community north of New York City. David Kirkpatrick spent 2 years researching a book about Zuckerberg and Facebook called The Facebook Effect.
He comes from an unbelievably supportive family in which he's the only son, and he has 3 sisters. So he was kind of the prince, and in fact, I think his parents called him the prince, and he was treated accordingly. So this is a guy without any problem of self-confidence.
Computer savvy from the start, Zuckerberg taught himself the complicated computer language C++, and by 9th grade had created a digital version of the board game Risk. Journalist Jose Antonio Vargas interviewed Zuckerberg for his New Yorker magazine profile.
He actually created a thing called ZUCKNET, which is an internal instant messaging system for the family so the computers could talk to each other. I mean, that's kind of the kid he was.
When he got sort of tired of his local high school, he decided to go to Exeter prep school, really because he just wanted more challenge.
It was at the exclusive Exeter Academy that Zuckerberg and his friend Adam D'Angelo created a music website called Synapse.
It was intended to anticipate what your preferences might be, and it was very, very popular. Even before he started Facebook, he was fending off offers from Microsoft and others to buy Synapse for well over $1 million.
Like a tech world version of an all-star athlete, big-name companies wanted to recruit him right out of Exeter. Again, Zuckerberg was unimpressed and chose instead to enter Harvard in 2002, where it wasn't long before he got himself in trouble. Zuckerberg hacked into the school's computers to collect images of students. Nicholas Carlson is deputy editor at BusinessInsider.com.
You can sort of tell that he's a little bit of a troublemaker. He creates something called Face Mash his first year in Harvard, and it's a sort of hot or not for the Harvard community. And then it maintained an entire list of Harvard students and which ones were the most attractive, ranking them by hotness.
Ellen McGirt interviewed Zuckerberg for Fast Company magazine.
Face Mash worked in kind of a little bit of an icky way. It made people upset. Obviously, people felt mocked or exposed, and it was one of the first big experiences that Mark had with the privacy issues of the masses.
Under pressure, Zuckerberg shut down the site. The Harvard Administration Board charged him with breaching security, violating copyrights, and violating individual privacy. But by then, FaceMash was a campus sensation. Zuckerberg had seen his future.
At the same time of getting trouble for building this mischievous web tool, he built a mischievous web tool that was really popular.
I imagine that he had a couple of sleepless nights worrying about how bad this thing was going to be, and was relieved when it all blew over, but was also incredibly curious about what he could then make next. If you're a genius with genius friends sitting in a dorm room, suddenly the world looks like a big, happy, open place if you can just get into that database.
At the time, the technology landscape was changing dramatically. Brad Stone is a senior writer at Bloomberg Businessweek.
The internet was really a much different world back in 2004. Friendster really demonstrates that a social network needs to have technical chops. The site goes down all the time, it's unreliable. MySpace also, it's full of ads, it's very distracting. It also begins to have technical instability.
At Harvard, Zuckerberg met classmate and future business partner Eduardo Saverin. Author Ben Mesrick is one of the few to have interviewed Saverin about the early days of Facebook.
Eduardo met Mark Zuckerberg in an underground Jewish fraternity. The underground scene at Harvard, you know, these were not really fun events. These were kind of strange little social settings, really bad parties, mostly all guys. And so Eduardo and Mark met in this scene, and they became friends pretty quickly because they were both kind of outsiders.
FaceMash got Zuckerberg noticed by 3 insiders. Upperclassmen building a social networking site called Harvard Connection, Olympic rowers and twins Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, with partner Divya Narendra.
Harvard Connection was an idea that I'd come up with when I was a junior in college. This was at the end of 2002.
The team had been building the site for nearly a year. 2 of their original programmers had moved on, and they desperately needed a new partner.
The 3 of us are not computer programmers by trade or practice. We did need an actual programmer to write the actual hard lines of code, and we thought Mark was that guy.
The trio reached out to Zuckerberg.
He was enthused, excited, and clearly his eyes were lighting up.
What happened next sparked a furious battle over how Facebook was actually created. The details unfold in email exchanges between Zuckerberg and the Harvard Connection team. At first, Zuckerberg appeared eager.
I read over all the stuff you sent, and it seems like it shouldn't take too long to implement. So we can talk about that after I get all the basic functionality up tomorrow night.
Then, Zuckerberg began to delay the project.
December 4th. Sorry I was unreachable tonight. I just got about 3 of your missed calls. I was working on a problem set.
December 10th. The week has been pretty busy thus far, so I haven't gotten a chance to do much work on the site or even think about it, really.
Zuckerberg was stalling because he was busy working on a similar social networking site based on Harvard's student directory called The Facebook. He and Saverin partnered to fund it.
Mark came to him and said, you know, you put up $1,000 and we'll launch this site. And, you know, there were no contracts. These were just 2 kids in a dorm room, really. But that's where it started.
Writer Nicholas Carlson interviewed more than a dozen people involved in the founding of Facebook and found instant messages retrieved from Zuckerberg's computer he said Zuckerberg sent to Saverin. According to Business Insider, the IM suggests Zuckerberg was deliberately misleading the Winklevoss twins.
He says things like, look at this site that I'm working on, Harvard Connection. Haha, they made a mistake. They asked me to do it for them because I'm working on my own Facebook.
We were always under the impression that Mark was working on HarvardConnection.com. There was never an indication from him that he could not do the work, didn't want to do the work, or was working on something identical on the side called the Facebook.
When he met with the Winklevoss brothers the last time, he saw that he probably should tell them that he's been working on a competing product. He sort of conferred about it with friends. But in the end, he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to blank them. I'm going to blank them in the ear.
On February 4th, 2004, just as he was expected to complete work on their site, Zuckerberg and his friends instead launched the Facebook. The Winklevoss brothers and Narendra found out about it the same way nearly everyone else at Harvard did.
It completely blindsided us. We definitely did not expect that.
Mark wanted to have control over his own project. He saw that they were onto something cool, the Winklevoss brothers, but he saw that he could do something cooler. And so, one, he wanted to control his own thing, and two, if he's going to go against someone, he's going to crush them, and that's what he did.
Mark Zuckerberg's new Harvard-based social networking site, the Facebook, was mired in controversy from the start. Just days after he launched it in February of 2004, the Winklevoss twins and Divya Narendra sent him a letter to cease and desist.
In a nutshell, our complaint against Mark Zuckerberg is fraud, unjust enrichment, and breach of contract.
Zuckerberg responded with a letter denying any wrongdoing, claiming his site was a separate venture and used none of the same code. The Winklevoss twins and Narendra would later appeal a $65 million settlement with Facebook. They lost in federal court, but that settlement could now be worth $200 million. But none of the vicious legal wrangling slowed the incredible momentum of the Facebook.
At that point, my roommates were kind of like, you know, this is pretty cool. Like, I bet this would work at other schools. So we launched it at Columbia, Yale, and Stanford. And within a couple of weeks, each of those three schools also like had thousands of users who were like, all right, this is pretty sweet. Like, let's just go all out and see how many schools we can launch this at as quickly as possible.
About this point in time, they started to take meetings with venture capitalists and with bigger advertisers, and this is all kind of Eduardo's doing.
They got a pretty early deal with Visa, and they had a deal with American Express. They had a number of advertisers that came and went. Then record companies started getting interested, and they began to get some pretty good revenue from the music industry.
Enter Sean Parker, who had his own connection to the music business. On a trip to New York, Zuckerberg and his partner, Eduardo Saverin, had dinner with the 24-year-old co-founder of Napster.
The seasoned entrepreneur and a truly creative individual, an extraordinarily interesting person who had worked his way into a network in the Valley that is just to die for, particularly at that point.
For Zuckerberg, Parker was a hero and a role model. Partner Saverin didn't agree.
Eduardo did not think highly of Sean from the very beginning. He thought that Sean was a snake oil salesman, that they didn't need Sean, that Sean talked a big game but was living out of a duffel bag and had been kicked out of 2 companies.
In the summer of 2004, with Saverin remaining on the East Coast, Zuckerberg left Harvard.
We came out to Palo Alto for the summer just to hang out because Palo Alto is kind of this mythical place where, you know, all the startups come from, and got ready to launch it at another 150 schools when the year started.
One of the things that Mark did that was very smart by going to Palo Alto was to actually enter the petri dish of entrepreneurialism, particularly for new technologies.
Zuckerberg and his friends moved into a large frame house with a swimming pool, and he reconnected with Sean Parker, who later became Zuckerberg's roommate.
He was the adult supervision. He's the guy who showed them how things are done in Silicon Valley. He's the one who showed them how to meet investors, how to negotiate with them, who to hire.
Mark has told me stories of just all of the guys coding late at night around dining room tables and eating chicken McNuggets and cereal.
And there's partying going on. Sean Parker is bringing them around to the different kind of cool Silicon Valley hotspots. And meanwhile, the website is growing astronomically fast. I mean, there's a 1 million member party by December of that year.
During this time, Parker gave Zuckerberg some shrewd advice he took to heart.
He sort of looked at him and said, you need to be the founder of this thing, and you need to be the CEO forever. You know, you can't turn this over to investors.
And Mark is able to negotiate a series of increasingly important investment deals that do 2 things. 1, allow him enough operating cash to hire some of the smartest engineers in the business, and 2, help him retain majority control in the company.
But tensions began to grow with Zuckerberg's original partner, Eduardo Saverin, who remained on the East Coast.
Eduardo felt that, you know, he was the business head of the company and he was no longer being treated that way. You know, Mark and Sean were taking meetings all over California. They were meeting with venture capitalists, and they were kind of ignoring Eduardo.
He retaliated.
Eduardo froze the bank accounts to try and get Mark's attention, and Mark and Sean began to sort of figure out a way to build the company without Eduardo.
Zuckerberg responded and froze Saverin out.
Eduardo was removed from the company masthead, and he essentially became a non-entity. He became a non-person. He was thrown out, and he became very upset.
Facebook had 1 million active users on college campuses nationwide, and big money was starting to pour in. Sean Parker, the new president of Facebook, introduced Zuckerberg to Silicon Valley angel investor Peter Thiel, who put $500,000 into the company. Then, in the spring of 2005, the venture capital firm Excel Partners offered Zuckerberg $12.7 million for an 11% stake in the company.
And didn't ask for much control at all. Walking away from that investment, Mark controlled 3 out of 5 board seats.
Which is a bizarre and unprecedented situation to have one individual have absolute, effectively dictatorial control over the disposition and direction of an increasingly giant company.
Overnight, the Excel investment gave Facebook a valuation of $100 million. As Facebook's public profile grew, so did Zuckerberg's control. This time, Sean Parker was edged out. In August of 2005, Parker was arrested for suspicion of cocaine possession. Although not formally charged with a crime and immediately released, it led to his abrupt resignation as president of Facebook.
He was the primary outside face of the company, and it was felt that somebody who was under any kind of a cloud with drugs was not the right guy to be the public face of Facebook. So Mark reluctantly agreed that he ought to leave.
Facebook was growing with remarkable speed, and Zuckerberg moved the company from its frat-like house with the pool to a larger and more conventional space in downtown Palo Alto.
3, 4,
But the college atmosphere remained the same.
One of the things that I do focus on at Facebook is making sure that the culture is very friendly, and that people hang out. In terms of managing this whole process, nothing, nothing. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing,
Even their employee interviews were different. Chris Kelly was brought on in the new position of Chief Privacy Officer to deal with Facebook's increasingly contentious privacy issues, at a time when the entire company numbered only a couple dozen employees.
The first time I met Mark, we climbed out on the roof, out through the window, and did our interview on the roof of what was then a World Wraps. And it was clear he was young, but he had a very sophisticated understanding of what had happened so far and where he wanted to take the company.
Determined to keep Facebook's unusual creative culture alive, all-night hackathons were one way to do it.
We have these hackathons at the company, right, where basically everyone gets together and just hacks on something and builds something all night long. And the only rule is that you aren't allowed to work on at a hackathon what you work on the rest of the time. So people work on crazy stuff.
Hackathons were some of the most kind of creative focus that you could ever imagine in a company. Imagining these incredibly talented engineers coming together for a night and saying, we're going to stay up all night and we're just going to program. And we're going to pick a project and we're going to get it done that night.
It's like, great, make it. We'll prototype it. And there'll be a prototype war and see who wins. It can be a contentious environment.
Bull, man, they wouldn't be able to get all the way across. No, I disagree. That's bull. We had an argument.
From Mark's point of view, this is where good ideas come from, quickly and efficiently.
Good ideas were flowing. Zuckerberg then made a change that would give Facebook a sudden and dramatic boost, allowing people to identify or tag themselves and their friends in photographs.
That was a huge, huge change that led to massive new use of Facebook, and photos became very rapidly by far the most used part of Facebook and became the single biggest driver of its growth.
That growth continued in one direction, up. According to Facebook's internal tracking, its user base had shot to 5.5 million users in less than 2 years. And media giants were banging on the door. In 2006, Yahoo baited the 22-year-old Zuckerberg with an extraordinary offer, a buyout for $1 billion. Even more extraordinary, Zuckerberg turned them down.
Now, if you are a parent of someone about Mark's age, you're looking at the Yahoo decision and thinking, Why did you not take that money?
It's never been about money. If it was, it would have just sold out.
We just felt that doing that and going down that path would not help us build Facebook out to what we thought it could be.
In 2006, Mark Zuckerberg rejected a $1 billion pitch from Yahoo when MTV pushed the ante even higher. Michael J. Wolff was CEO of MTV Networks.
Mark had taken me on a walk around Palo Alto and shown me his apartment. And afterwards, we sat down for lunch, and I told him we'd be willing to pay as much as $1.5 billion to buy Facebook outright. His answer was, I think it's worth a lot more. And besides, you've seen my apartment. I don't really need that kind of money. And at the same time, I may never have an idea as good as this one. So I'm not that interested in selling.
There was internal strife around it, no question. There were a lot of people who wanted to sell. Ultimately, Mark decided to turn down the offers.
Zuckerberg wasn't ready to sell because he had some ideas that he thought would make Facebook even more popular. One of them was called Newsfeed, a kind of real-time wire service of updates about what users were up to.
Newsfeed is what everybody is doing at that point, or what they're posting, what they're linking to, the world that they live in, which is really what a newspaper is, right? It's a living, breathing newspaper of people around you.
But many Facebook users thought that newspaper sent out too much information and violated their privacy. 750,000 of them launched an online protest.
To say that it was unpopular at first is a dramatic understatement. They were under siege at the office. They couldn't leave. They were surrounded by news trucks.
Almost 10% of our user base at the time joined the Students Against Facebook Newsfeed group.
Zuckerberg was forced to apologize.
He wrote his apology note himself. It was probably a good learning experience. When Facebook changed some of the privacy controls, it was an overstep. I do think he takes those seriously, but I do think that he's willing to continue to overstep for the purpose of making a product that he wants to make.
The apology was not a surrender. Zuckerberg was sure that users would get used to this new level of sharing, and he turned out to be right. After tweaking Newsfeed, it became one of the most popular elements of the Facebook experience.
It just happened that the first time I ever met Mark was 2 days after that happened. And I can tell you, even though his members were in open revolt, he was not the slightest bit flustered. He had complete confidence that everything was going to work out all right.
Zuckerberg decided it was time to take Facebook beyond its college roots and introduce it to the general public. The response was stunning. Membership doubled, shooting up to 12 million by 2006. Zuckerberg radically altered the Facebook experience again when for the first time the 23-year-old CEO invited programmers from around the world to develop apps for Facebook. It was another turning point, expanding Facebook from an insular world of information to a platform.
And it was like the gold rush. You open up this wonderful platform and in comes every kind of developer with every kind of idea, from video sharing to games to things that blinked to things that turned into, ballerinos and hippos and just every kind of fun, wonderful thing.
The platform companies or the operating system companies always do the best. I mean, think of Microsoft. It had this ubiquitous Windows platform, and all these other companies wrote programs for Windows. Facebook's really trying to create itself in that model.
And in 2007, Microsoft itself entered the picture, this time with a deal Zuckerberg couldn't turn down. And for the first time, the world got a glimpse of what Facebook may really be worth.
By the time people were finally getting used to the idea that anyone would pay $1 billion for Facebook, Microsoft comes along and pays $250 million for 1.6% of the company. It was outrageous. It valued the company at $15 billion. This took Facebook from a thing that a lot of people use to a thing that everyone was talking about, the $15 billion company.
But for a $15 billion company, Facebook was only making a meager $30 million in profits. To remedy that, Zuckerberg announced a sweeping new advertising system in the fall of 2007. One part of it let companies set up their own Facebook pages and advertise using social ads. Lou Kerner covers social media and owns shares in Facebook.
Social ads on Facebook are ads where they would say that your friends Meg and Ryan like Virgin America. And it turns out, not surprisingly, that when you see that your friends like a product, you're more likely to click on that ad. So social ads have been very successful on Facebook virtually from the beginning.
But another part of Facebook's new advertising plan, Beacon, gave users far more than they wanted, and they let Zuckerberg know about it.
Zuckerberg's made a lot of mistakes. The next mistake, which was a really big one, was Beacon.
You go to a third-party e-commerce site and you buy something, and unless you tell it not to, really quickly, it's going to go back and tell all your friends that you just bought a diamond engagement ring. And obviously, you know, that sort of secret revealing can cause a lot of trouble.
There was the great rallying cry that Facebook ruined Christmas because suddenly everyone's purchases were being broadcast to their entire network.
Zuckerberg really tried to defend it for a while. It took him a while to realize how wrong it was.
On December 5th, 2007, Zuckerberg made another apology. He had overreached yet again. But as with previous mistakes, it wouldn't really matter. Facebook was just too popular. And it wasn't long before Zuckerberg was loosening up the network's privacy controls one more time. More than 4 years after co-founding Facebook, Zuckerberg still seemed uneasy in the public spotlight.
What's your next thing you're going to do? Get bought? No. None of these rumors are true, right?
You know, this is making me feel very uncomfortable.
All right.
By 2009, rumors were indeed swirling that Facebook would go public. Instead, Zuckerberg took money from a new investor. Yuri Milner, CEO of the Russian internet investment firm Digital Sky Technologies, offered a $200 million deal for just 1.9% of the company.
Deals of that size are kind of never easy. There's a lot of back and forth. This deal was about the vision that we shared, how big this company can get. Everything else was sort of secondary.
Milner's investment allowed Facebook to continue to expand, and it kept the development of the company firmly in the hands of its founder. Zuckerberg knew that pushing Facebook advertising even further was the key to continued growth. For years, Zuckerberg believed that Facebook was in a unique position.
Today, even with the most advanced advertising systems that exist, they only have estimates of what someone's gender might be, or what someone's age might be, or what they might be interested in. But on Facebook, we know exactly what gender someone is, and exactly how old they are, and exactly what they're interested in.
Jeremy Smith is Chief Strategy Officer for Second Market, a company that brokers shares in privately held companies which cannot yet be traded on the public market.
What makes Facebook so desirable from the perspective of advertisers is that they are able to accumulate information on their users like nobody else. The funny thing is, the users don't really view it as data. It's themselves. It's their information. It's their lives that they're putting on there. But as far as advertisers are concerned, it is the holy grail of data.
Pushing the boundaries of that holy grail of data was about to get Zuckerberg in trouble again. In December 2009, he revamped the privacy settings for Facebook's then 350 million users. Unless users individually restored their settings, previously private information was now available to everyone on the internet.
Many people just sort of took that default and somewhat inadvertently allowed a lot of their information to become public. And many privacy advocates believe that they didn't explain that or disclose it sufficiently.
A firestorm of complaints from users and consumer groups forced Zuckerberg to backtrack again, sparking concerns in Congress.
We are here today to urge Facebook's creator and CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, to revisit this new policy as soon as possible. We believe Facebook should reverse its policy to begin exploring guidelines so users know upfront what's happening.
Adding fuel to the fire was the surfacing of still more instant messages. Business Insider published messages they said showed a friend asking then college-aged Zuckerberg why people shared their emails with him. Zuckerberg's response was curt and profane.
You know, I mean, I asked him point blank about it, and he was very embarrassed by the fact that he had sent these IMs.
Less than 1 month later, he was put on the hot seat in a memorably awkward interview at the All Things Digital conference.
Do you feel like you're violating people's privacy?
You know, there were real learning points and turning points along the way in terms of building things. If I knew what I knew now then I hope I wouldn't have made those mistakes. But I can't go back and change the past. I can only do what we think is the right thing going forward.
You know, anybody who's ever kind of doubted what Facebook is about or want to question his integrity, I mean, they can keep pointing back to that, right? To that instance of like, I can't trust that guy. That is going to be our check on him for as long as he remains CEO, you know, and in charge of that company. It's going to be like, okay, you're not that guy. Well, prove to us that you're not that guy.
Chris Hufnagel, the director of privacy programs at the University of California, Berkeley, believes Mark Zuckerberg purposefully pushes the envelope on privacy.
In most situations where a company does something that's unpopular, they have blowback. They lose the ability to do something. But in Facebook's case, we have something I call blow forward, where they take 2 steps forward, there's some type of public reaction, and they just take a little step back. And so over time, they've been able to open up profiles more and more.
Mark does not think you should be a different person at work than you are at the bowling alley, in bed, at school. You know, he basically thinks you should be consistent across all these environments. So that's a very radical view for many older people.
By the time Mark Zuckerberg turned 25 in 2009, he had accumulated so much notoriety, wealth, and power that author Ben Mesrick had written a book about him and the founding of Facebook.
This story started for me at an email I received just out of the blue to my website, and Eduardo Saverin was angry. He wanted to tell his story. He had co-founded Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg, and then he said had been kicked out of the company, and he felt betrayed, and he wanted to talk.
Saverin talked to Mesrick for 6 months about a lawsuit he'd filed against his former Harvard classmate for diluting Saverin's share of the company. According to Mesrick, Facebook found out Eduardo was talking to him.
And they essentially settled with Eduardo. Nobody knows for sure what happened, but what I've heard is he got 5% of Facebook, and he had to sign an agreement that said he would never speak to Ben Mesrick again.
But Mesrick already had enough material for his book.
My proposal had leaked out on the web. Aaron Sorkin saw it. Scott Rudin saw it. So Sorkin immediately signed on to write the screenplay, and everything happened very quickly from there.
The pre-release publicity surrounding the movie also seemed to force Zuckerberg to go on a PR offensive. The previously press-shy Zuckerberg was suddenly everywhere.
If you build something great, that's what people care about. When people don't care about what someone says about you in a movie.
He gave Oprah a tour of his house in 2010 and announced on her show a $100 million donation to public schools in Newark, New Jersey.
$100 million.
The social network opened in wide release on October 1st, 2010.
People want to go on the internet and check out their friends, so why not build a website that offers that friends, pictures, profiles? I'm talking about taking the entire social experience of college and putting it online.
Zuckerberg complained about his on-screen portrait as a ruthless, socially challenged power geek with no friends. He said there were factual errors in the script.
They frame it as if the whole reason for making Facebook and building something was because I wanted to get girls or wanted to get into some kind of social institution. And I mean, the reality for people who know me is I've actually been dating the same girl since before I started Facebook. They just can't wrap their head around the idea that someone might build something because they like building things.
Though he initially said he wouldn't see the movie, Zuckerberg ended up taking his entire staff to it. He even showed up on Saturday Night Live.
You ever end up seeing the film, the the social network?
Yeah, I did.
Cool. Oh, thanks. And what did you think?
It was interesting.
Thank you to the Hollywood Foreign Press for this extraordinary honor.
The Social Network won a Golden Globe Award for Best Dramatic Picture, as well as 3 Academy Awards.
First Tunisia, now Egypt. What's next?
But to an increasing number of people around the world, Facebook wasn't just a Hollywood movie. It was affecting real life. In late 2010, demonstrators started taking to the streets in Tunisia and later in Egypt to protest their repressive governments. By this time, more than 70% of Facebook's 500 million plus users lived outside the United States. In Egypt, one flashpoint for the anger was a case of police brutality. At the center of the protests was a Google employee who ran a Facebook page.
Wael Ghonim was the manager in Egypt of a page that was a memorial to this guy who had been beaten, tortured, and killed by the secret police. And that group became very, very large, many, many hundreds of thousands of members during the period leading up to the revolt against Mubarak. Facebook expedited the ability of people to express their dissatisfaction, which clearly sped up the process of these revolts.
The governments of Tunisia and Egypt fell. Protesters expressed their gratitude to Facebook on the streets. One named his newborn daughter Facebook. And Wael Ghonim sang the social networking site's praises on CNN.
I want to meet Mark Zuckerberg one day and thank him. I'm talking on behalf of Egypt. This revolution started on Facebook when hundreds of thousands of Egyptians started collaborating content. You know, like we would post a video on Facebook. It would be shared by 50,000 people on their walls within a few hours.
Facebook itself was very quick to try to distance themselves from that political activity. I mean, obviously, they supported it, but they don't really want to be seen as a tool of change because obviously Facebook wants to be active in regimes like China. They don't necessarily want themselves viewed as a tool of insurgency.
Zuckerberg has taken on a personal goal that might help him with his mission to connect the world. He says he spends an hour a day studying Chinese, which could potentially help him gain 1 billion new friends.
It's the fastest growing and the biggest internet market in the world. There are hundreds of millions of users, and his mission is incomplete if he's not in China.
Mark Zuckerberg's power had never been greater, and once again, speculation grew that he would take his company public. Despite enormous pressure, Zuckerberg has been hesitant to pull the trigger and cash in.
100 years, 200 years from now, what's going to be more important? The money, right? Or the fact that he has had this kind of impact? Or the fact that he's, you know, executed and developed and helped evolve this thing that is more than just a technology site and it's more than just a website. And so I think that's why it's never been about money and it's never been about status.
When companies go public, it's a tremendous strain on the management. And in fact, on top of all of that, when you go public, you open yourself up to even greater government scrutiny.
Aware of that scrutiny, Facebook has amped up their presence in Washington with a team that includes several former White House aides and influential Capitol Hill insiders.
Political official after political official will tell you, if you are absent from the debate, you're likely to be the person who kind of gets cut out. And so presence in that debate, particularly when Google and Yahoo and Microsoft and a number of other very large players are spending a lot on lobbying, is a mistake.
Today, several Facebook founders, including Mark's friends and classmates, have left the company to start new ventures on their own. They've been dubbed the Facebook Mafia. But much of Silicon Valley talent is on their way in. Top programmers are leaving companies like Google to be a part of Zuckerberg's momentum. And Facebook and Google, the two internet behemoths, are competing in other ways. Ryan Singal is a staff writer for Wired magazine.
Facebook and Google's relationship is pretty simple. They just don't like each other. They're really, they're competing cultures. Facebook was sort of young, brash, wild, and Google is like, an algorithm company. Like, these are guys that, like, any problem, there's got to be a way that they can write a little algorithm that'll fix it.
It's clear that Google missed the rise of social, and Eric Schmidt has admitted to being flat-footed around Facebook and around social. They've tried a number of things, most spectacularly the Buzz social network. That just hasn't worked.
Then, in May of 2011, Facebook was embarrassed when it was revealed that they had launched a secret attack on Google.
Facebook is doing damage control after revelations it hired a PR firm to plant negative stories about Google.
Facebook claimed publicly it was not a smear campaign, but the exchange revealed just how vicious the competition has become.
The whole Burstyn Marsteller flap was really just an in-your-face expression of the animosity that has sprung up not only between these two companies, but almost the personal Shakespearean drama that's playing out between Google and between Facebook, which frankly has a lot of former Google execs who would like nothing more than to supplant their former company.
You can't underestimate how driven Mark Zuckerberg really is. He says his mission is to, make the world more open and a better place. His mission is also to be #1, right? He wants to be, inscribed on granite above Bill Gates, I think.
He is well on his way. Like Gates, another Harvard dropout, Zuckerberg is a fierce competitor. He moved quickly to vanquish rivals Google and Twitter with a stunning acquisition in April 2012.
Instagram is off the market in an instant. Facebook likes the photo sharing app so much it's paying $1 billion for it in cash and shares ahead of its IPO. But the app is free and has little known revenue. Still, Facebook may need Instagram more than Instagram needs the money. Instagram has become a photo sharing competitor and a social network all its own.
It was considered a radical and defensive move.
Facebook cannot take any chance that any other social network oriented toward photos could really get traction that would compare to theirs. And I think, so there's a preemptive quality to this. Also, I think almost certainly Google was interested and probably maybe forced Facebook to act now.
1 month later, Facebook finally went public in the largest IPO on record for an internet company, making Mark Zuckerberg a multi-billionaire.
This is an awesome moment.
The CEO in hoodie and sneakers retained tight control of his company with 57% of shareholder voting rights.
Facebook has literally changed the world. We've moved from the country to the village to the town to Facebook. It's just getting started, too. I think it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
For a site that's able to move from the dorm room to a site where, my 80-year-old mother and myself and my chiropractor and my third grade class all reunites on the site and we all have something to talk about, it's an achievement.
Zuckerberg is just as visionary as Steve Jobs. He's going to prove just as influential as Bill Gates. But he's not dealing with a piece of gadget. He's not dealing with some program. He's dealing with our lives. He's dealing with our identities. So that's why I think we're all going to have to kind of keep him in check, in a way.
We make decisions at Facebook not optimizing for, what is going to happen in the next year, but what's going to set us up to really be in this world where every product experience that you have is social, and that's all powered by Facebook.
"60 Minutes, Rewind."
Are you on Facebook yet? The site is up to 60 million users so far, with a projection of 200 million by the end of the year. If you're not on Facebook, here's how it works. You set up a profile page with details about yourself, and then decide who gets to see it. Friends use their pages to share personal news, exchange photos, team up on political causes, or just play long-distance Scrabble. It can be a useful tool or an addictive waste of time. Either way, Facebook is having a dramatic impact on the World Wide Web, and it's estimated to be worth $15 billion. Sitting atop this growing company, directing an internet revolution, is a young, geeky computer programmer who created the site only 4 years ago. This is the face of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, the mogul who's guiding its extraordinary growth. What everyone wants to know is he old enough to be running a company some people say is the biggest thing since Google? Tell everyone how old you are.
I'm 23 right now. So,
and you're running this huge company.
Well, it's not that
23. Big. And here he was helping me set up my own Facebook page with a profile of my likes and dislikes. Guess what my favorite TV show is?
I can't.
Duh. All right, put 60 Minutes there. Next, we added my friends, family. That's my son-in-law, old classmates. Within a few minutes, I got a friend request. Here's a guy I haven't talked to in 2 years, and I'm so thrilled to hear from him. Mark. This is why so many find the site addictive. In a world with no cell phone or email directories, Facebook has become a way to find lost friends.
Right, I mean, it used to be the case, like, you'd switch jobs, and then maybe you wouldn't keep in touch with all the people that you knew from that old job, just because it was too hard. But one of the things that Facebook does is it makes it really easy to just stay in touch with all these people.
Of course, if someone tries to friend you, you can ignore them. And privacy settings allow you to deny access to your page, say, to your boss or your parents.
Good afternoon, Facebook. How may I help you?
Facebook headquarters in downtown Palo Alto looks like a dorm room. The 400 employees who get free food and laundry show up late, stay late, and party really late. Zuckerberg, who's made the cover of Newsweek and is reportedly worth $3 billion, sits at a desk like the other software engineers writing computer code. Have you changed your lifestyle? You don't look like you're buying really expensive clothes.
No, I'm not buying really expensive clothes.
Are you buying things? Are you buying things that you would
No, I have a little, like, one-bedroom apartment with a mattress on the floor. That's where I live.
It's almost like a Disney movie.
Right.
23-year-old kid takes over
Right.
a major company.
Right.
Kara Swisher, who used to write about Silicon Valley for the Wall Street Journal and now has a blog, All Things Digital, has called him the toddler CEO. What do you think it's done to him as a person to be 23 years old?
I think it's hard. I think when all of a sudden you're the smartest person in the world and you're the meal ticket for everybody, and this is the big hit. This is the new Google at this point. And so Mark is under a lot of pressure because everybody wants something from him.
Like the founders of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, Mark Zuckerberg is looked up to in Silicon Valley as a visionary. You seem to be replacing Larry and Sergey as the people out here who everyone's talking about. You're just staring at me.
Is that a question?
Yeah. We were warned that he can be awkward and reluctant to talk about himself. So we turned for help to his Facebook page, which says he's a Harvard alum. You're not a Harvard alum.
That's true. We don't have a setting for dropout, so...
He dropped out of Harvard in 2004, where he was intending to study psychology. His mom is a psychiatrist. Here she is on Facebook. His dad's a dentist. Mark was a computer whiz early on, writing software in 6th grade. In his second year at Harvard, he built a site where students could rate or berate the looks of classmates through ID photos he lifted off Harvard's computers. You got into deep trouble from this little prank.
Yeah. Well, Harvard was just not happy that I was using their images and...
Yeah, well, they said you hacked.
Mm-hmm.
Did they punish you?
Yeah, it was put on some sort of, I don't know, what do you call it?
Probation?
Sure.
Soon thereafter, he and his 2 roommates created an online version of the Harvard Student Directory where kids could message each other. They called it the Facebook, and launched it from their dorm room. Within 4 months, they had expanded to 40 colleges and over the summer moved to Palo Alto. But Mark had done code writing for some upperclassmen with a similar idea, and they have filed a lawsuit. 3 Harvard students are suing you, claiming that you stole their idea for Facebook.
Well, I mean, we know that we didn't steal any ideas or code, so we're just kind of waiting until that comes out in court.
In the lawsuit, they claim that you were duplicitous. Are you worried about it?
No, I don't really spend a whole lot of my time worrying about that. I mean, we have lawyers at the company who deal with that stuff, and it's not a huge concern. I mean, probably about half my time is spent on business operation type stuff.
Despite his young age, Zuckerberg seems to have made one savvy business decision after the next. He expanded access to Facebook from college students to high schoolers, then in 2006 to adults, his fastest growing demographic. Now he's inviting everyone on the site to create new software and pocket the profits themselves. It's a way to keep the next big thing on Facebook. New programs emerge daily, like Facebook Scrabble.
I actually have a couple games going on now with my grandparents. So they got on Facebook and we started playing Scrabble together.
So Facebook is changing the way we communicate with our friends and with our grandparents. It's also changing politics. Every major candidate has a page. Zuckerberg says there seem to be more Republicans on the site than Democrats. And among them, Barack Obama, with his young person's following, is hugely popular. Hillary Clinton is hugely unpopular. You know, it used to be first you went on Face the Nation if you were a candidate. Then, well, no, you went on Letterman. Now it seems the candidates have to be on Facebook. Are you changing the way candidates are running for president?
Well, I think because politicians can communicate with tens of thousands of people at the same time, it's pretty effective for them in campaigning.
Facebook is growing so quickly, there's talk of it becoming a giant slayer. Is Facebook a challenge to Google?
I think they are.
Charlene Lee, an analyst at Forrester Research, a technology consulting company, says Facebook is a threat to Google because it could become the first site people go to search. Say you want information about a family vacation in Maui. Lee says when you check Google, you could get a list of almost 200,000 hits.
Versus I can go on Facebook. I can go and ask my friends. And people will write back to me, oh, I've done things, and this is what I recommend, and knowing you and your kids, they will really like doing this. So the next time I do something very specific like that, chances are I'll probably go to Facebook.
Which is why Yahoo offered to buy Facebook in 2006 for $1 billion in cash. Zuckerberg declined, but then Microsoft swooped in and bought 1.6% of the company for $240 million. That meant that Bill Gates valued Facebook at $15 billion, roughly the same as Ford or CBS. Some analysts say that's wildly unrealistic, since Facebook has yet to figure out how to make money off its huge audience. Is it true that you don't make that much money?
I think that's a pretty relative thing. But I mean, as a private company, we just have the advantage of not necessarily having to report to the outside world all of our financials.
He may duck the question, but there's no getting around the fact that Facebook needs to find a way to generate revenue. And so Zuckerberg is experimenting with ads, trying to cash in on his users' own recommendations. Say you write on Facebook that you like a certain movie. That's turned into an ad. Or maybe you like a scarf from Bloomingdale's.
So this isn't an ad that's going to go to a lot of people. Basically, when you put that information in your profile that you bought a scarf and that you like that scarf, right? That's something that your friends might find interesting, right? So what we do is we might show that information to your friends a little bit more proactively as an ad, right? So it
but
wouldn't
with
go
me
to,
in the ad?
Yeah, but that would basically be the ad.
Okay, but it's almost like an endorsement, like Michael Jordan for Nike. I become the spokesman for that ad.
Well, that's what you're doing when you're putting that information in your profile.
The real trouble started when they began using a tracking program called Beacon that monitors what you buy on over 40 websites and automatically reports it to your friends without explicit permission.
People signed up for Facebook thinking that it was a way to just stay in touch with their friends. And now some of them feel that there's some snooping going on. Is there any concern you're turning Facebook into something much more commercial?
I actually think that this makes it less commercial. I mean, what would you rather see? A banner ad from Bloomingdale's or that one of your friends bought a scarf?
But when a Facebook user bought his wife a diamond ring online, the surprise was ruined because Beacon notified all his friends and his wife about it on Facebook. With stories like that, criticism of Beacon began to build. But Zuckerberg dug in his heels until he had a full-blown PR disaster on his hands, including petitions and bloggers writing obituaries.
Well, I guess this shows how difficult it is for a company like yours to make money through advertising and protect people's real privacy and their sense of privacy.
You know, it might take some work for us to get this exactly right. This is something that we think is going to be a really good thing.
Not a real answer to the privacy question, more like the canned response of a typical business executive.
There have to be ads either way because we have to make money. I mean, we have 400 employees and, we have to support all that and make a profit.
But 3 big advertisers threatened to pull out, and Zuckerberg was forced to relent. He agreed to amend Beacon, making it easier for users to turn it off, and he apologized.
The story will continue after this.
So do you think that Mark failed as a leader in the Beacon
Absolutely.
fiasco?
Yes.
What do you want to call it?
Leader.
What were his mistakes?
His mistake was doing it. Doing it, period. His mistake was not explaining it to people. His mistake was not backing off very quickly when it was clear that it was a problem. I just feel like you see some of these mistakes they're making very early on, and you worry where the judgment is.
Is he a good CEO?
I don't know. I think he's very young.
But those around Zuckerberg say he is learning fast. He might still wear a hoodie and no socks, but he's becoming a suit as he ponders whether to take his company public this year.
This would be a good place to announce that.
I think what I can announce is that it is highly unlikely that we will go public in 2008. When going public makes sense to do, we'll do that, and maybe that's 2 years out, maybe it's 3 years out.
Do you think that your age is an asset or a liability?
I mean, there's probably a little bit of both, right? I mean, there are definitely elements of experience and stuff that someone who's my age wouldn't have, but there are also things that I can do that other people wouldn't necessarily be able to.
Dr. Mark Zuckerberg.
I love this place. Thank you all for coming out in the rain, the pouring rain. We're going to make this worth it for you. President Faust, Board of Overseers, faculty, friends, alumni, proud parents, members of the ad board, and graduates of the greatest university in the world. I am honored to be here with you today because, let's face it, you accomplished something I never could. If I get through this speech today, it'll be the first time I actually finish something here at Harvard. Class of 2017, congratulations. Now, I'm an unlikely speaker today, not just because I dropped out, but because we're technically in the same generation. We walked this yard less than a decade apart. We studied the same ideas and slept through the same Act 10 lectures. We may have taken different roads to get here, especially if you came all the way from the quad. But today, I want to share what I've learned about our generation and the world we're all building together. But first, these last couple of days have brought back a lot of good memories. How many of you remember exactly where you were and what you were doing when you got that email telling you got into Harvard? I was playing the video game Civilization, and I ran downstairs and got my dad, and for some reason, his first reaction was to video me opening the email. That could have been a really, really sad video. But I swear, getting into Harvard is the thing my parents are most proud of me for. My mom is nodding. You all know what I'm talking about. Look, guys, it's tough to beat this. You'll see when you get out there. How many of you remember your first lecture here at Harvard? Mine was Computer Science 121 with the incredible Harry Lewis. Harry. I was running late for class, so I threw on a t-shirt, and I didn't realize until afterwards that I put it on inside out and backwards, and my tag was sticking out the front. I couldn't figure out why no one in class would talk to me. Except for this one guy, KX Jin. He just went with it. We started doing our problem sets together, and now he runs a big part of Facebook. And that, class of 2017, is why you should be nice to people. But my best memory from Harvard is meeting Priscilla. I had just launched this prank website, FaceMash, and the ad board wanted to see me. Everyone thought I was going to get kicked out. My parents drove up here to help me pack my stuff. My friends threw me a going-away party. Who does that? As luck would have it, Priscilla was at that party with her friends, and we met in line for the bathroom in the Foho Bell Tower, and in what must be one of the all-time most romantic lines, I turned to her and said, "I'm getting kicked out in 3 days, so we need to go on a date quickly." Actually, any of you graduating today can use that line. "I'm getting kicked out today. We need to go on a date fast." I didn't end up getting kicked out. I did that to myself. Priscilla and I started dating, and, you know, that movie made it seem like FaceMash was so important to starting Facebook. It wasn't. But without FaceMash, I never would have met Priscilla. And Priscilla's the most important person in my life. So you could still say it was the most important thing I built in my time here. We have all started lifelong friendships here, and some of us even families. That's why I'm so grateful to this place. Thanks, Harvard. Today, I want to talk about purpose. But I'm not here to give you the standard commencement about finding your purpose. We're millennials. We try to do that instinctively. Instead, I'm here to tell you that finding your purpose isn't enough. The challenge for our generation is to create a world where everyone has a sense of purpose. One of my favorite stories is when JFK went to go visit the NASA Space Center, and he saw a janitor holding a broom, and he asked him what he was doing, and the janitor replied, "Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon." Purpose is that feeling that you are a part of something bigger than yourself, that you are needed, and that you have something better ahead to work for. Purpose is what creates true happiness. And you are graduating at a time when this is especially important. When our parents graduated, that sense of purpose reliably came from your job, your church, your community. But today, technology and automation are eliminating many jobs. Membership in a lot of communities has been declining, and a lot of people are feeling disconnected and depressed and are trying to fill a void in their lives. As I've traveled around, I've sat with children in juvenile detention and opioid addicts who've told me that maybe their lives would have turned out differently if they just had something to do, an after-school program or somewhere to go. I've met factory workers who know their old jobs aren't coming back and are just trying to find their path ahead. For our society to keep moving forward, we have a generational challenge to not only create new jobs, but create a renewed sense of purpose. I remember that night I launched Facebook from that little dorm in Kirkland House. I went to Noakes with my friend KX, and I remember telling him clearly that I was excited to help connect the Harvard community, but one day someone would connect the whole world. The thing is, it never even occurred to me that that someone might be us. We were just college kids. We didn't know anything about that. There were all these great big technology companies with all these resources, and I just assumed one of them would do it. But this idea was so clear to us that all people want to connect. So we just kept working on it, day after day after day. And I know that a lot of you are going to have your own stories just like this. A change in the world that seems so clear that you are sure someone else is going to do it. But they're not. You will. But it's not enough to have that purpose yourself. You also have to create a sense of purpose for others. And I found that out the hard way. You see, my hope was never to build a company. I wanted to have an impact. And as all these people started joining us, I just assumed that that's what they wanted to do too. So I never took the time to explain what it was that I hoped we'd build. A couple years in, some big companies wanted to buy us. I didn't want to sell. I wanted to see if we could connect more people. And we were building the first version of Newsfeed at the time, and I thought, if we could just launch this, it could change how we all learn about the world. Nearly everyone else wanted to sell. Without a sense of higher purpose, this was their startup dream come true, and it tore our company apart. After one particularly tense argument, one of my close advisors told me if I didn't agree to sell the company right now, I would regret that decision for the rest of my life. Relationships were so frayed that within a year or so, every single person on our management team was gone. That was my hardest time leading Facebook. I believed in what we were doing, but I felt alone. And worse, it was my fault. I wondered if I was just wrong, an imposter, a 22-year-old kid who had no idea how things actually worked. Now, years later, I understand that is how things work when there's no sense of higher purpose. So it's up to all of us to create it so we can all keep moving forward together. And today, I want to talk about 3 ways that we can create a world where everyone has a sense of purpose. By taking on big, meaningful projects together. By redefining equality so everyone has the freedom to pursue their purpose. And by building community all across the world. So first, let's take on big, meaningful projects. Our generation is going to have to deal with tens of millions of jobs replaced by automation like self-driving cars and trucks. But we have the potential to do so much more than that. Every generation has its defining works. More than 300,000 people worked to put that man on the moon, including that janitor. Millions of volunteers immunized children around the world against polio, and millions of more people built the Hoover Dam and other great projects. And now it's our generation's turn to do great things. Now I know, maybe you're thinking, I don't know how to build a dam. I don't know how to get 1 million people involved in anything. Well, let me tell you a secret. No one does when they begin. Ideas don't come out fully formed. They only become clear as you work on them. You just have to get started. If I had to know everything about connecting people before I got started, I never would have built Facebook. Movies and pop culture just get this all wrong. The idea of a single eureka moment is a dangerous lie. It makes us feel inadequate because we feel like we haven't had ours yet. And it prevents people with seeds of good ideas from ever getting started in the first place. Oh, and you know what else movies get wrong about innovation? No one writes math formulas on glass, okay? All right? That's not a thing, okay? It's really good to be idealistic, but be prepared to be misunderstood. Anyone working on a big vision is going to get called crazy, even if you end up right. Anyone taking on a complex problem is going to get blamed for not fully understanding it, even though it's impossible to know everything up front. Anyone taking initiative will always get criticized for moving too fast because there's always someone who wants to slow you down. In our society, we often don't take on big things because we're so afraid of making mistakes that we ignore all the things wrong today if we do nothing. The reality is, anything we do today is going to have some issues in the future. But that can't stop us from getting started. So what are we waiting for? It is time for our generation-defining great works. How about stopping climate change before we destroy the planet and getting millions of people involved, manufacturing and installing solar panels? How about curing all diseases and getting people involved by asking volunteers to share their health data, track their health data, and share their genomes? You know, today, our society spends more than 50 times as much treating people who are sick as we invest in finding cures so people don't get sick in the first place. It makes no sense. We can fix this. How about modernizing democracy so everyone can vote online? And how about personalizing education so everyone can learn? These achievements are all within our reach. Let's do them all in a way that gives everyone in our society a role. Let's do big things, not just to create progress, but to create purpose. So taking on big, meaningful projects together is the first thing we can do to create a world where everyone has a sense of purpose. The second is redefining our idea of equality so everyone has the freedom to pursue their purpose. Now, many of our parents had stable jobs throughout their careers, but in our generation, we're all a little entrepreneurial, whether we're starting our own projects or finding our role in another one. And, you know, that's great, because our culture of entrepreneurship is how we create so much progress. An entrepreneurial culture thrives when it is easy to try lots of new ideas. Facebook wasn't the first thing I built. I also built chat systems and games, study tools and music players, and I'm not alone. J.K. Rowling got rejected 12 times before she finally wrote and published Harry Potter. Even Beyoncé had to make hundreds of songs to get Halo. The greatest successes come from having the freedom to fail. Now, today, we have a level of wealth inequality that hurts everyone. When you don't have the freedom to take your idea and turn it into a historic enterprise, we all lose. And right now, today, our society is way over-indexed on rewarding people when they're successful, and we don't do nearly enough to make sure that everyone can take lots of different shots. Now, let's face it. There is something wrong with our system when I can leave here and make billions of dollars in 10 years while millions of students can't even afford to pay off their loans, let alone start a business. Look, I know a lot of entrepreneurs, and I don't know a single person who gave up on starting a business because they were worried they might not make enough money. But I know too many people who haven't had the chance to pursue their dreams because they didn't have a cushion to fall back on if they failed. We all know you don't get successful just by having a good idea or working hard. You get successful by being lucky too. If I had to support my family growing up instead of having the time to learn how to code, if I didn't know that I was going to be fine if Facebook didn't work out, then I wouldn't be standing up here today. And if we're honest, we all know how much luck we've had to get to this point in our lives. Every generation expands its definition of equality. Previous generations fought for the vote and civil rights. They had the New Deal and Great Society. And now it's time for our generation to define a new social contract. We should have a society that measures progress not just by economic metrics like GDP, but by how many of us have a role we find meaningful. We should explore ideas like universal basic income to make sure that everyone has a cushion to try new ideas. We're all going to change jobs and roles many times, so we need affordable childcare to get to work and healthcare that's not tied to just one employer. And we're all going to make mistakes. So we need a society that's less focused on locking us up and stigmatizing us when we do. And as our technology keeps on evolving, we need a society that is more focused on providing continuous education through our lives. And yes, giving everyone the freedom to pursue purpose isn't going to be free. People like me should pay for it. And a lot of you are going to do really well, and you should too. That is why Priscilla and I started the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and committed our wealth to promoting equal opportunity. These are the values of our whole generation. It was never a question of if we were going to do this. The only question was when. Millennials are already one of the most charitable generations in history. In just 1 year, more than 3 in 4 US millennials donated to charity, and more than 7 in 10 raised money for another one. But it's not just about giving money. You can also give time. And I promise you, if you just take an hour or two a week, that's all it takes to give someone a hand and help them reach their potential. Now, maybe you're thinking, that's a lot of time. I'm not sure if I have that much time. I used to think that. You know, when Priscilla graduated from Harvard, she became a teacher. And before she'd do education work with me, she told me that I needed to get my own experience teaching a class. At first, I complained. I said, you know, I'm kind of busy. I'm running this company. But she insisted. So I taught an after-school program at the local Boys and Girls Club on entrepreneurship. I taught those kids lessons on product development and marketing, and they taught me what it was like growing up feeling targeted for your race, and what it's like having a family member in prison. I shared stories of my time in school, and they shared their hope that one day they would get to go to college too. For 5 years, I've had dinner with those students every month. One of them even threw Priscilla and me our first baby shower. And next year, they're going to college. Every one of them, first generation in their families. We can all make time to give someone a hand. Let's give everyone the freedom to pursue purpose, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because when more people can turn their dreams into something great, we are all better for it. Purpose doesn't only come from work. The third way we can create a sense of purpose for everyone is by building community. And in our generation, when we say purpose for everyone, we mean everyone in the world. Now, quick show of hands. How many of you here are from another country? All right, now keep your hands up. How many of you are friends with one of these folks? Now we're talking. See, we have grown up connected. In a recent survey of millennials around the world, asking what most defines our identity, the most popular answer wasn't nationality, ethnicity, or religion. It was citizen of the world. That's a big deal. Every generation expands the circle of people we consider one of us. And in our generation, that now includes the whole world. We understand that the great arc of human history bends towards people coming together in ever greater numbers, from tribes to cities to nations, to achieve things that we could not on our own. We get that our greatest opportunities are now global. We can be the generation that ends poverty, that ends disease. And we get that our greatest challenges need global responses too. No country can fight climate change alone or prevent pandemics. Progress now requires coming together, not just as cities or nations, but also as a global community. But we live in an unstable time. There are people left behind by globalization across the whole world. And it's tough to care about people in other places when we don't first feel good about our lives here at home. There's pressure to turn inwards. This is the struggle of our time. The forces of freedom, openness, and global community against the forces of authoritarianism, isolationism, and nationalism. Forces for the flow of knowledge, trade, and immigration against those who would slow them down. This is not a battle of nations. It is a battle of ideas. There are people in every country for more global connection, and there are good people against it. And this isn't going to be decided at the UN either. It's going to happen at the local level when enough of us feel a sense of purpose and stability in our own lives that we can start to open up and care about everyone else too. And the best way to do that is to start building local communities right now. We all get a lot of meaning from our communities. Who here's from Elliott House? How about Lowell? I know you guys found community because you literally live right on top of each other. And Mather? I'll just leave that there. Whether our communities are houses or sports teams, churches or a cappella groups, they give us that sense that we are a part of something bigger, that we are not alone. They give us the strength to expand our horizons. And that's why it's so striking that over the past few decades, membership in all kinds of communities has declined by as much as 1/4. That's a lot of people who now need to find a sense of purpose somewhere else. But I know that we can rebuild these communities and start new ones because many of you already are. I met Agnes Agoye, who's graduating today. Agnes, where are you? Agnes spent her childhood navigating conflict zones with human trafficking in Uganda, and now she's trained thousands of law enforcement officials to keep communities safe. I met Kayla Oakley and Neha Jain. We're graduating today too. Stand up, guys. Kayla and Neha started a nonprofit that connects people suffering from chronic illnesses with people in their communities who are willing to help out. And I met David Razu Aznar, who's graduating from the Kennedy School today. David, stand up. David is a former city councilor who fought to make Mexico City the first Latin American city to pass marriage equality, even before San Francisco. And this is my story too. A student in a dorm, connecting one community at a time, and keeping at it until one day we can connect the whole world. Change starts local. Even global change starts small with people like us. In our generation, the struggle of whether we connect more, whether we achieve our greatest opportunities, comes down to this: your ability to build communities and create a world where every single person has a sense of purpose. Class of 2017, you are graduating into a world that needs purpose. And it's up to you to create it. Now, maybe you're asking yourself, can I really do this? Well, remember when I told you about that class I taught at the Boys and Girls Club? One day after class, I was talking to my students about going to college, and one of my top students raised his hand and said that he wasn't sure he could go to college because he's undocumented. He wasn't sure if they'd take him. Last year, I took him out to breakfast for his birthday, and I wanted to get him a gift, so I asked him what he wanted, and he just started talking about struggles that he saw other students in his class facing, and finally said, you know, I'd really just like a book on social justice. I was blown away. Here is a young guy who has every reason to be cynical. He wasn't sure if the country he calls home, the only one he's known, was going to deny him his dream of going to college. But he wasn't feeling sorry for himself. He wasn't even thinking of himself. He has a greater sense of purpose, and he's going to bring people along with him. It says something about our situation today that I can't even say his name because I don't want to put him at risk. But if a high school senior who doesn't know what the future holds for him can do his part to move the world forward, then we owe it to the world to do our part too. So before you walk out those gates one last time, and as we sit here in front of Memorial Church, I'm reminded of a prayer, Misha Berach, that I say whenever I face a big challenge, that I sing to my daughter, thinking of her future when I tuck her in at night. And it goes, "May the source of strength, who's blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing." I hope you find the courage to make your life a blessing. Congratulations, class of 2017. Good luck out there. you.